Today, we're diving into a dire warning from billionaire investor Ray Dalio about a crisis worse than a recession. In a recent interview, Dalio outlined the 5 forces driving global economies towards collapse, drawing parallels to multiple times as seen throughout history. But we're going to dive into how Bitcoin fixes this. So let's break it down and stay tuned.
Watching Bitcoin climb higher feels like watching a train leave without you, but it's not too late. At Drip2 BTC, you can grow your Bitcoin like never before. Earn up to 3,000% APR on credit conversions and discounts on Bitcoin purchases. Step 1, buy Bitcoin. Step 2, deposit it. Step 3, let your wallet do the work. Don't miss this chance to change your life. Start today at drip2btc.com.
Hey guys, welcome back. Drip Coach here with Drip and Farm for Poverty, where we don't trust, we verify, and operate with integrity and transparency. If you're not familiar with Ray Dalio, he is the founder of one of the, if not the largest hedge fund, Bridgewater. I don't know if it's still the largest, but it could be like second, I'm not sure. But he's a billionaire, self-made. I found out about him. I read his book, Principles, great for business and direction. He has a couple of other books out as well, but most recently he took Principles and made a 45-minute video. I'm going to show the 4-minute clip here, but basically about the changing world order. And he made this, the original one, I think like 2 years ago now, and then this remake about a year ago. And man, it is striking to see where we're at already with this, and it's going to tie directly into this clip he did recently on NBC News. But it's basically these 5 principles and how we are heading into some dire times. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen, but the TLDR and the one certainty is that Bitcoin will rise to the top at the end of all this. And if you are not hedging your bets with that, then you are in for a rude awakening. So let's first play this short clip on the changing world order that explains kind of his thesis, which is also a bit about what ties into this video here. I think I played this on my channel before, but for those who hadn't seen it, it'll be a good refresher.
I studied the 10 most powerful empires over the last 500 years and the last 3 reserve currencies. It took me through the rise and decline of the Dutch Empire and the guilder, the British Empire and the pound, the rise and early decline in the United States Empire and the dollar, and the decline and rise of the Chinese Empire and its currencies, as well as the rise and decline of the Spanish, German, French, Indian, Japanese, Russian, and Ottoman empires, along with their significant conflicts, as measured in this chart. To understand China's patterns better, I also studied the rise and fall of Chinese dynasties and their monies back to the year 600. Because looking at all these measures at once can be confusing, I'll focus on the 4 most important ones: the Dutch, British, US, and Chinese. You'll quickly notice the pattern. Now let's simplify the form a bit. As you can see, they transpired in overlapping cycles that lasted about 250 years, with 10 to 20-year transition periods between them. Typically, these transitions have been periods of great conflict because leading powers don't decline without a fight. So how am I measuring an empire's power? In this study, I used 8 metrics. Each country's measure of total power is derived by averaging them together. They are education, inventiveness and technology development, competitiveness in global markets, economic output, share of world trade, military strength, the power of their financial center for capital markets, and the strength of their currency as a reserve currency. Because these...
Quick summary on that, in case that went over your head. Basically, Ray is famous, I guess you could say, for just basically analyzing patterns and looking at, in his words, it's just another one of those, and how to evaluate that and then make a decision based off of the framework saying that we've seen this movie before. This is a sequel. So all he did with this to say that there is a changing world order is look at the history of all these other nations and reserve currencies, like you mentioned, and then find the patterns. And then that's where he's coming up with the metrics in which he used, those 8 defining factors, and then about how long it took, and then what signals when that collapse comes into play. And again, the TLDR is that it's a cycle. So a new world order or a new political power comes in, it's a reserve, and it holds that reign for XYZ long, and then another one takes its place. So that is a good enough intro. We might do the rest of it, I'm not sure, but I want to come into this quote or 5 questions from the interviewer here that Ray answers, and then we're going to dive into this with Bitcoin.
And you say that the tariff problem is a symptom of a much greater problem. What do you mean by that?
There's a financial problem. There's an imbalance problem. There are basically 5 big forces through history that drive everything. First, there's the money, credit, debt, economic cycle. in which there's a building up of debt in a cyclical way that becomes too large, and we're going to have problems. We're going to have a government debt problem. Maybe we can get into this. The second big force through time is the internal conflict force. The left and the right, differences in wealth and values causing a conflict that we're seeing it changing our political order. So the first is changing our monetary order. The second is changing our political order internally. And then the third is the great world order, how countries deal with each other. When there's a rising power challenging an existing power, and now we are going from multilateralism, which is largely an American world order type of thing, to a unilateral world order in which there's great conflict. And the other two factors all through history have been acts of nature, droughts, floods, and pandemics. And number four is technology changing. And how they are coming together are the main forces behind this. For example, there can't be imbalances anymore in that environment.
So those five forces, just to recap, and we'll dive into them a little bit, is money, credit, debt cycles, internal conflict, global power shifts, acts of nature, and technology. So we can clearly see right now in the money, credit, debt cycle, we can look back and see historically that multiple countries have had issues with the money, credit, debt cycle. That leads to hyperinflation. So we may not have experienced this in the US, and depending on where you're watching this video, you may have actually be familiar with a neighbor or even in times been in this locations that experienced this. Most recently, which is not here, was Venezuela in 2018, 2016. They're still going through it right now. I can't remember exactly when that kicked off, but this isn't showing all of the just high parts of inflation, just regular inflation. This is just showing hyper, where they pretty much just eroded the entire currency. So that's force number one. So the US has not experienced that. We're not there just yet. Our GDP has not exceeded that 200% range, or 300. I can't remember what the number was. I showed it in a previous video. I don't have it up right now. But basically there's a tipping point where it's likely within the next decade or two that a country will experience hyperinflation if they don't get those numbers down. Force number two is internal conflict, kind of like political views, polarization. And you can see that in this visionofhumanity.org chart, where they just track political unrest and just seeing it trend upward and viewpoints shifting, allowing for more intolerance, or not allowing for more intolerance. Yeah, being more violent, things of that nature. I don't really care about left versus right, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. It's just the fact that it's getting less and less peaceful and less ability for people to understand someone else's viewpoints. And you can see that as well if you travel overseas to other countries. Those culture shocks tend to come into play when you have different people migrating to another location and then bringing their viewpoints, their culture, their ideas, and it butts up against the existing one. So that's just, again, human nature and kind of tribalism. So that makes perfect sense. But the inability to accept that is this force number two, because it just gets more and more violent. Then number three, he was talking about the global power shifts. So this is like what we're seeing right now happening in real time, where, like in the previous video I put down, China's not bending the knee. And we've seen this happening over the last decade with BRICS, talking more about getting out from underneath the global reserve currency and finding some alternatives. And as of recently in the news, they have been settling trade, I think China and Russia, in partly gold and in partly Bitcoin. So this is a global power shift. It's not saying that the US is just going to lose its global reserve currency, but it is showing that there are other countries that are not willing to just play ball or bend the knee anymore. They want to kind of go their own way or fight back against that. Number four is pandemics, or what we've seen, plandemics. And there's been a recent trend of trying to figure out if AI could predict the next pandemic. I believe they're already engineering that somewhere in a lab. There will be something come out that will, force us one way or another. I believe the next one is going to be pushed towards more of AI and CBDCs, so like trying to create a digital ID and make that mandatory. So I believe that will be the next one. It'll be something leading about how AI is creating fake news, and we need to get real digital IDs into the hands of human beings, proof of humanity, so to speak. And they'll do that, and then the incentive for that would be something like a central bank digital currency or something like that. That's just my tinfoil hat theory. But something along those lines, a pandemic is underway. And then the fifth force is technology. So rapid tech advancements, like we're seeing right now with AI and automation, disrupt jobs and economies. And that leads to a shift in all of these things that we just mentioned as well, because it disrupts the existing supply chain, so to speak. So the reason why I say Bitcoin fixes this is because all 5 of those forces can be underlined by Bitcoin. We can fix the debt cycle. You can remove internal conflict by having a unbiased monetary policy. It can remove the issue with global tariffs and power shifts. Acts of nature, you can't exactly eliminate that one because it happens naturally, but at least if you have access to capital, such as Bitcoin, that's decentralized, you do not have to, you can opt out if something happens in your area, kind of like the rich people were able to opt out of COVID and travel to other places that didn't lock things down. And of course, it is built on the rails of AI and tech. I'm gonna go back to the rest of his 5-minute changing world order clip to get some additional context.
These powers are measurable. We can see how strong each country is now, was in the past, and whether they're rising or declining. By examining the sequences from many countries, we can see how a typical cycle transpires. And because the wiggles can be confusing, we can simplify it a bit to focus on the pattern of cause-effect relationships that drive the rise and decline of a typical empire. As you can see, better education typically leads to increased innovation and technology development, and with a lag, the establishment of the currency as a reserve currency. You can also see that these forces then declined in a similar order, reinforcing each other's decline. Let's now look at the typical sequence of events going on inside a country that produces these rises and declines. In a nutshell, the big cycle typically begins after a major conflict, often a war, establishes the new leading power and the new world order. Because no one wants to challenge this power, a period of peace and prosperity typically follows. As people get used to this peace and prosperity, they increasingly bet on it continuing. They borrow money to do that, which eventually leads to a financial bubble. The empire's share of trade grows, and when most transactions are conducted in its currency, it becomes a reserve currency, which leads to even more borrowing. At the same time, this increased prosperity distributes wealth unevenly, so the wealth gap typically grows between the rich haves and the poor have-nots. Eventually, the financial bubble bursts, which leads to the printing of money, and increased internal conflict between the rich and the poor, which leads to some form of revolution to redistribute wealth. This can happen peacefully or as a civil war. While the empire struggles with this internal conflict, its power diminishes relative to external rival powers on the rise. When a new rising power gets strong enough to compete with the dominant power that is having domestic breakdowns, external conflicts, most typically wars, take place. Out of these internal and external wars come new winners and losers. Then the winners get together to create the new world order, and the cycle begins again.
So we can, pause that. We can see this one right here where he said printing money and collapse. This happened right here in 2008, the banking crisis. This was the creation of Bitcoin. So this was the final straw that broke the camel's back to show how broken our system is. And we're seeing it happen again in real time now, which is what led to this interview. So it's not that it happens, and then you can earmark that and say on this date, going forward, now we move in this direction. But basically from 2008 until now, so you have like a 20-year gap, maybe this goes on to 2028 or something, I'm not quite sure. But we are clearly in some kind of leverage breaking portion of the system right now, and everyone's trying to figure out how it will finalize. There's no way to really know how the story ends at this stage, but we see this with the tariffs and with China not backing down, and with what people are looking at in the economy and things of that nature. Like in the other video I put you, we just can't course correct this ship that quickly. There's just way too much stacked on both ends in the US and in China that it just makes more sense to see, as Ray put here, that another power just kind of comes out. I don't think that's going to be China, but I believe what I mentioned on previous videos is that it'll be a combination of countries that band together. So that's why I kind of feel like BRICS and whatever happens in Europe, and then again in the North and South America, like I feel like there's going to be 5. Like there will be 5 kind of dominant group together world orders, so to speak, and no singular one is the global reserve currency. You'll have like 3 to 5 reserve currencies that are allowing for trade globally. Like that's just the way I see it playing out. And I don't know how long that would actually take. But again, the TLDR is that Bitcoin is at the epicenter of all of that.
I want to ask you about something that's on a lot of people's minds, your predictions for the future. And I want to start with the R word. I know you think this is just a piece of it. Of course, I'm talking about a recession. Do you think it is likely that the United States will dip into a recession because of President Trump's tariffs?
I think that right now we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession. And I'm worried about something worse than a recession if this isn't handled well. A recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP, and whether it goes slightly there, we always have those things. We have something that's much more profound. We have a breaking down of the monetary order. We are going to change the monetary order because we cannot spend the amounts of money, so we have that problem. And when we talk about the dollar and we talk about tariffs, we have that. We are having profound changes in our domestic order, how ruling is existing, and we're having profound changes in the world order. Such times are very much like the 1930s. I've studied history, and this repeats over and over again. So if you take tariffs, if you take debt, if you take the rising power challenging existing power, if you take those factors and look at the factors, those changes in the orders, the systems, are very, very disruptive. How that's handled could produce something that is much worse than a recession, or it could be handled well. Let's take the debt situation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And that is where the opportunity lies. So like Ray said, so it doesn't matter what side of the camp you're on, politic-wise, if you agree with what's happening, you disagree with what's happening, the smartest thing you can do is avoid the politics and focus on the life raft that is being thrown out there right now while this tidal wave is coming. And that is Bitcoin, because everything will have to flow towards sound money principles again. And again, I want to echo this. It can be sound money principles like Bitcoin, like gold, or it could be them creating a new monetary policy with central bank digital currencies. So I don't know if this is all part of the plan to move towards something like that, but the fragility of the system has been exposed, and it is breaking in real time, and it has to be replaced by something else. And if you are on the decentralized freedom money camp, then that something else is clearly Bitcoin. If you want to cling to the old system, or as Max Kaiser says, you want to go down with the ship, then fuck you. Like, you'll be stuck on the Fiat system, and then they'll give you a pacifier with whatever the new thing is they roll in. But the writing is on the wall, showing you right now in real time what's happening. And yeah, it sucks depending on where you live, and it may not be the outcome that you want, but you still have an opportunity to opt out and get ahead of this once the dust settles. So I don't get into, recession, depression, whatever. Like, if they change the definitions on all that stuff and however they want to fit it, hyperinflation or inflation, whatever. The main thing is spend less than you earn and take the remainder and put it into Bitcoin. Not financial advice, of course. And stack sats, stay humble, touch grass. Like, that's all you really need to do. At the end of the day, the solution globally is to print money. If they're printing money, they're stealing it from you. And the only way to get out from underneath that theft is to put that into something that cannot be stolen, cannot be debased, cannot be inflated away, cannot be confiscated. Bitcoin. That's it. All right, smash that HBO special, help brother out, like, subscribe, comment down below, and until next time, live daily and achieve your impossible. See ya. Want to pay your in real life bills with crypto? How about send crypto directly to anyone with a bank account? BRICS Finance is a decentralized solution to be your own bank and connect your crypto earnings to real world bills and payments. They do not take custody of your assets and allow support on multiple blockchains and Web3 wallets. Sign up below using my referral link and you will get $50 back when you make your first $50 bill payment with crypto. Additionally, I will be using referral bonuses to airdrop, donate, or burn based on community feedback. Sign up now.